Let's head over Unity Hub and then start a new project. Alright, now that we've started a new project, let's start by adding a new game object. And we want to add a cube to our scene. So I'm going to right click in the hierarchy and then head over to 3D object and select cube. As you can see, we've now added a cube to our scene. I'm just going to position it to add 0, 0, 0 on the X, Y, and Z axes. And I'm going to set the scale for the X axis to 10 and scale for Z axis to 50. Okay, now I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. So as you can see, if I just select the cube, it will show you the transform tool, move tool, sorry, for all 3 dimensions. So you can use these arrows to move the game object around your scene. Okay, I like it positioned like this. And that's your first new game object that you've added to your scene. Now you can customize this, and if you just head over here in our project menu, you want to right click, go over to create, and what we want to create is a new material. Now when you create a new material, you can change all these settings. You can change the color, the rendering mode, the source, smoothness, the texture, all that. And the cool thing about materials is you can use the same material with many different game objects. And when you change the settings for a material, it will automatically be updated for all of the game objects that you apply it to. So let's play around with this material here. We'll change the color to red. Okay. And now we'll apply this material to our cube. So you just have to drag it over onto the cube. And now as you can see, our cube is red. Now if I head over to the material again, and if I change the color to anything else, you can see that the color of the cube is being updated at the same time. So this can be very convenient when you're dealing with a lot of game objects at the same time. Now I'm just going to set it to a darker shade of red, sort of like a dark brown color. Okay, and that's fine. That's how I like it. I'm just going to rotate here. I'm holding Alt and then dragging around the scene to rotate my view so that we can get a better look. And okay, that's our first cube. Now we can rename this. So by clicking on the cube and then heading over to the right to the inspector, you can rename it to whatever you want. I'm just going to call this ground. Okay, and I'm going to leave everything else just the way it is. Now, I want to add another game object, which will also be a cube. So another 3D object, I'm going to select cube. And this cube, I'm going to select it. I'm going to reposition it using the move tool. Okay, I would like it somewhere around here. And I'm going to leave the scale just the way it is. And this is it. I'm going to try running the game now so you see what happens. So you can see that I'm running the game and nothing's happening. It's just a cube and another larger cube just staying where they are. Now, if you click on one of the cubes, the ground or the new cube that we added, you can see that they have this component called a box collider. Now, in Unity, game objects can have many components. Everything that you see here in the inspector, for example, transform, cube mesh filter, mesh render, box collider, these are all components, and game objects are made up of different components that are preset that they come with, or you can create new game objects with entirely new components that you can add. Using scripts is a way of creating your own components, but Unity comes with preset components that you can use straight away. So to this new cube here, we're going to click on Add Component, and we're going to search for rigid body. Not the 2D rigid body, the regular rigid body, which is for 3D objects. And now we have added a rigid body component to our cube. So now let's try running and let's see what happens. I'm just gonna reposition this to somewhere about here, and let's try and see what happens. I'm gonna run the game by clicking on the play icon here. And as you can see, the cube fell and it is now standing on the ground cube. So they have collided and we gave the cube gravity. So rigid body component is basically your physics component. You use rigid body to add physics to a game object. If you look at some of these settings here, you can change drag, you can change the mass to make the object heavier. So this is a pre-made physics component that is made by Unity. So it makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier for us to use physics in our game. Now this other component here, which was already existing on the cube, the box collider, is another important component that is responsible for what just happened in our scene. So if this box collider wasn't present, I'm just gonna go ahead and click on this check mark here so that I just turned off the box collider. And now I'm gonna try running the game and let's see what happens. So now our cube it just went through the ground game object and it didn't collide with it. So this box collider here is responsible for collisions. If you add box colliders to any game object, they can then collide with each other. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to try to make this cube move forward. Okay, before that I'm just going to rename the cube to something like player. Okay, and I'm going to reposition it to somewhere back here. And I'm also going to reposition the main camera so that we can get a better view. Okay, and I'm just going to bring this back here. Alright, now to make our cube move forward, we have to do that by creating a new component. And to create a new component, we have to use scripting. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Component, and I'm going to search for New Script. And you can now name the new script. I'm just going to call it Player Movement. And then click on Create and Add. Now, if you look over to your Assets section in your project menu, there's now a new script. And if you have installed Microsoft Visual Studio Community and linked it to Unity, if you just double click on the script, it will open up Visual Studio Community for you. Alright, so this is the new script that we've created and it's opened up in Microsoft Visual Studio Community. Now, if you're familiar with other programming languages, that you might be aware of variables. So we're going to start by creating our new variable. And in C# programming, when you start creating your variable, you need to specify its scope. So it can either be public or private for basics. So we're going to create a new variable of type public. So we're going to type in public. So a variable that is public means that it can be referred to even outside the script. And also when you declare a variable to be public, it will appear in the Unity Inspector menu so you can change its value there. So I'm going to create a new public variable, and then you also need to specify the type of the variable. So this one is going to be of type float. Now float is basically a decimal value, so it can be any decimal value. And public float, and then we're going to name it. So I'm going to name this movement speed. and I'm going to set its value to equal to 10. And at the end, you need to type in f because this is a float variable. And I'm going to finish off with a semicolon. Remember, every line of code that you write in C# programming, you need to finish off with a semicolon. Now, to add movement, we need to mess around with the position of the game object, right? So to refer to the position of the cube, all you need to do is type in transform, because that is the component that relates to the position. And then when you type in transform, if you type in dot, you get a list of different parts or components of transform that you can choose. So we're going to choose transform dot position, okay? And we want to change this. So all we're going to do is set it equal to the transform dot position again, plus a new value. So transform dot position is a three-dimensional vector3 type variable. And if you want to add to it, we also have to create a new vector3 type variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to do transform dot position plus new vector3, and then open a pair of parentheses, and then inside the parentheses you want to put in values in the x, y, and z direction. So in the x direction we don't want to change anything, in the y we don't want to change anything, and for it to move forward we have to change it in the z axis. So in the z axis I'm going to do movement speed, and then again end the line of code with a semicolon. And this is the line of code that is going to add movement to our cube. It's just going to make it move forward. Now, do notice that I've written this line of code within this update function. Now, what this update function does is it calls or runs whatever lines of code that is within the function every frame. So for every frame that shows up in your game or runs in your game, everything that is within this function will be running. So basically this line of code will be running every frame. So every frame, the cube is going to be moving forward by this much, by the movement speed, which is a value of 10. Now this other function that comes within your script at the start is the start function. And it does explain it here. Basically, this function is run once when your game starts. So you can initialize things here. For example, if you want to initialize the position of game objects, initialize some settings, you normally do that here. So now that we've written the line of code for movements, we're going to save this. So I just clicked on Command S to save, or you can go up here, File, and then Save. Okay, and now I'm going to head back to Unity, and remember to save your game projects consistently so that you don't lose progress if something crashes or you get stuck. So always try to do Command S to save, or I think on Windows it's going to be Option or Control S to save. Okay, so now that we're back, we're going to try running the game. So let's click on play. And wow, that was very fast. Okay, so our cube did move forward, but it moved forward at a very fast speed. Now, the reason why this is happening is, let me head back over to our script. And if you notice, we haven't used a very large value. We're just using 10 for movement speed. However, the reason why the cube moves so fast is because remember I said that this function is being called every frame. So depending on how powerful your computer is, the computer that you're running the game on, it will be running the game with different frames per second. So for example, if it's a very powerful computer, you might be getting over 200 frames per second. So basically, this is going to be called 200 times in 1 second. So our movement speed changed from 10 to basically 2000 in 1 second. So a way to fix that is instead of wanting the movement speed to be added every frame, we want to set it to be um, added every second, so based on time. Now to do that, all you have to do is multiply movement speed by time dot delta time. Okay, you don't need to know what all this is. Just know that it's referring to a delta time component within the time class. Okay, so if we multiply movement speed by that, it will now be based on time itself. So every second is going to move forward by a value of 10. Now let's save it and then head back to Unity. I'm going to try running the game now. And now you can see it isn't super fast. It is moving at a steady pace. So that was it for this video. We showed you how to create your first script. We added movement to a game object. We added a rigid body component to game objects. So you know how to add physics to your game objects now. And we'll do more in our next video. Thank you.